Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where I am quite excited to get Phil Dunkelberger onto the podcast today, who I genuinely consider to be a friend of the show. Following the recently announced cybersecurity executive order, Phil is going to speak with us today about how effective he anticipates the EO to be for public-private partnerships and implications of this newly mandated MFA. And in addition to his current role of CEO of Nok Nok Labs and being the former CEO of PGP, he also has a few stories to share too. I mean, he was the former head of the cyber division within Tech America. And while at Tech America, which was, I believe, formerly the Cybersecurity Industry Alliance, he even lobbied Congress and White House officials on the importance of data breach policy and legislation. And in addition to all of that, he also works closely alongside Richard Clark, a current Nok Nok Labs board member who's well known in cybersecurity circles. But underneath all that, Phil believes that the hackers are the big winners out of this recent announcement, and that if public-private partnerships on cyber don't improve, we could be in for a reckoning. Almost need a big drum roll after that cliffhanger there, but enough from me. Buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to California, where Phil is waiting to speak with us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you remind the listeners with a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, I'm Philip Dunkelberger. I'm the president and CEO of Nok Nok Labs. The company that I run is building a set of capabilities so people can get in and get out and do their work without having to deal with passwords and authentication over and over again in their daily lives, working with devices like their phones, their laptops, their tablets.
And not only are you the CEO of Nok Nok Labs and the former CEO of PGP, but you're also the former head of the cyber division within Tech America. So can I ask that you share your origin story? I mean, where did it all begin? Where did your passion for tech come from? And ultimately, what put you on this path you're on today?
Yeah, I literally walked in the door of Xerox Corporation looking for a job back in 1981. And the door I walked through happened to be Xerox, the inventors of Ethernet. So I literally walked in to my first job in tech in a networking environment. But the networking environment included what was known as the Star Workstation, which gave the world a graphical user interface of mice and windows. So from the very beginning, I was dealing with local area networking and large screen, large device capability with the ability to print. What you see is what you get on the screen on a laser printer. So kind of the office of the future is where I walked into my tech experience. And from Xerox, I went to Apple, which productized the Xerox offering and ultimately popularized it with the Mac. And then from there, went to Symantec and got into the software business. And from there, I ended up at PGP into the pure play security business, both at PGP1 and PGP2. And that's where ultimately I cut my chops in the security side of the business, was in the encryption place with PGP.
And I was just thinking, I can't believe I think it's just over 2 years since we last spoke. Where does the time go? I think it was back in August 2019, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was before all of the things that have gone on, have really come to the fore. And a lot of things that we talked about then, really never anticipated what the learnings have been for the last 18 months. And, the time goes quickly. I was thinking when preparing to talk to you today, it's been 40 years this year that I did this. And it's been roughly 10 years with the idea of starting Nok Nok Labs and building what is now known as the FIDO protocol. So a lot of time has passed, water under the bridge, but my passion for tech hasn't waned. What I learned early on in my career was really what tech has to do is solve legitimate customer problems. And that's the exciting part of it. If we can apply the technology correctly, we certainly can solve a lot of usability issues and ultimately security issues, because everything we do, it seems, in tech now underpins our economy, our medical capability, a lot of things that day to day now, where would we be without the tech that's come in the last 40 years?
And I remember the last time we spoke, your passion for solving real problems really shines through. And I believe you also lobbied Congress and White House officials on the importance of data breach policy and legislation. Can you expand on that and why you're so passionate about this topic?
Yeah, that goes back to the earlier note that we were part of the team that Tech America, which was a very large lobbying group. We joined that as a group of people concerned that security and the government, the nexus of those two coming together with policy, really was not getting its light shining on it. It was a bolt on. Security was not really looked at as separate of other parts of tech. And really the idea was to go to the White House and to Congress and even state houses in the states and really make people aware that security isn't an afterthought. It's not somebody else's issue. It's got to be baked into the infrastructure. And at the time, data breach laws were really being enacted in state and local governments, and many times they were at odds with each other. So from state to state, you had businesses not being in compliance. So in 50 states, you were ultimately going to have no normalcy of the data breach laws. And we worked hard on that. We worked hard on giving businesses that were doing the right thing a safe harbor, so they weren't going to suffer the consequences of maybe businesses that were reckless with your data. At the same time, we were trying to normalize it so the regulatory environment wasn't going to be as onerous as it can be when states and federal governments or international governments don't agree on the context and the solution. So I've spent a lot of time on that. I'm passionate about it because what you ultimately want to be is caring about the individual and their data and making sure that it's safe and secure if people are collecting it. They're not monetizing you and your data and being reckless with it. Yet at the same time, you don't want to penalize businesses that are trying to do the right thing in the care of that data. So there's a balance there, and I've spent a lot of time and a lot of air miles when I could fly, going back and forth to Washington and other capitals, Brussels, et cetera, in the EU, really trying to make a pitch that you've got to normalize this so businesses and their customers can be fairly treated with their data.
And regular listeners will know, of course, that Nok Nok is a trusted leader in passwordless consumer authentication to the world's largest organisations. But 2 years is a long time since we last spoke. So for our newer listeners and people hearing about you for the first time, can you tell them a little bit more about the kind of problems that you're solving and ultimately what makes you different from those other solutions out there?
Well, fundamentally, what we started out doing is trying to gain, again, agreement with a standard. My work at PGP was all about making it a global standard that people could essentially use encryption and whisper if they needed to across the internet, securely using their data. It's a similar vein here that strong authentication, the ability to authenticate yourself strongly or signal strongly to the relying party that you're dealing with. Let's say a payment system or your bank is an easy one to do that we all are learning to do more and more under this COVID regime globally. The idea is that we wanted to eliminate not only usernames and passwords because of the friction they cause, forgotten, stolen. There are big attack surface out there when collected. We see data breaches happening every day. And the target is your credentials. Most data breaches, as the studies have shown, start with a stolen credential. We want to make the credential embedded essentially in the infrastructure that, the idea of saying knock knock to somebody when we named the company was to say the answer of the kids' jokes are knock knock, who's there? Yeah. Because ultimately you really want to know who you're dealing with, both on the relying party side, your bank, a payment system, an e-commerce system, and you want to know that you're doing it securely, but you don't want to go through having a dongle in your pocket and having to remember your mother's maiden name and her dog's name from 1963. You don't want to go through that friction. So the goal of Nok Nok Labs was to build a global standard, which we've done. Literally in 2022, there'll be billions of endpoint devices, people like Apple, Google, Microsoft, supplying the endpoint capability where you will literally be able to click on a URL, let's say a payment system, You won't have to log in. You won't even have to swipe a biometric password or a biometric if that's already been cached, meaning the coefficient has been cached in your system securely. You can log in, you can do your business. The system is key-based, meaning you've got a lock and a key. The internet's made up of locks and keys. And you're literally going to be able to go through all of the locks that they've got to give you your entitlements. Because really, the internet today and most people's behaviors is you've just got devices and services that you're looking to get into, get your entitlement, what you're entitled to, whether it's credit, placing an order, et cetera, and then get on with your life. And the back end system wants to be able to say you had a good transaction, wants to be able to verify you. And if it's a highly regulated business like commerce or banking, have a record that the transaction was done securely. It's a different way of doing the old AAA, Neil, of authentication. The middle A was always your authorizations. Today they're called entitlements, what you're entitled to do on a website. And then the last is accounting, and really saying we've accounted for this securely and having a record we can report on. It's really taking all that, removing user frictions so there's no logins anymore of having to remember things or carry hardware around with you. Ultimately, the back end is going to be able to do more commerce more quickly. When there's a remediation step where you have a problem, you're able to have somebody, if you have to call a call center, instead of saying, "Hi, Phil," or "Hi, Mr. Dunkelberger, it's your phone we're talking to. It might not be you there, so can you re-authenticate yourself?" The authentication experience would be something like this. "Hi, Phil, we see you've been working on the web for 20 minutes trying to solve this problem. Let me help you with that." Completely different user experience than we have today most of the time. And ultimately, what we're doing is central to digital transformation that everybody is talking about. I guess the best way to sum up this soliloquy I'm giving you is this. A large bank in Europe said to me recently, "Fundamentally, Phil, we haven't met 50% of the customers that we're going to have in the next 3 to 5 years. And we need to do that in a different way." Or better said, as a friend of mine said at a recent meeting about the protocol, the FIDO Fast Identity Protocol, we call it, said, "There's 5 billion people in the world who don't know what a username and password is. Let's not tell them."
Oh, I absolutely love that. And I would say 2 years ago, the world was a very different place. And one of the biggest changes that we've both seen is, and everybody listening too, is that there's this expectation now to work from anywhere, on any device, on any network, and at any time. So I'm curious, do you think that the hackers are now ahead of the game? And does it ever frustrate you that boardrooms, or some boardrooms, still don't get the risks?
Oh, I think you hit on two key things that have come out of COVID. The yields are up 80% on phishing. Phishing is attacks are up 100%. Again, stealing the credential is where most data breaches begin. So the hackers are having a field day, and they're having a field day mainly because, quite frankly, it's not just in the boardrooms. It's a lot of general purpose IT folks are just faced with the complexity and conundrum of providing services now differently, whether that's behind the firewall to an enterprise user of enterprise tool sets, or whether that's a consumer that is going to use maybe your website or your service for the very first time. All of them are dealing with complexity in front of the firewall, behind the firewall. And again, that's where I feel that are just users with devices looking for services. And when you've got that, and you've got really what we've found, in many cases, a very naive way of looking at how the internet actually works and how you have to authenticate everything you do, device authentication, user to device, all of those things have to be in alignment for you to get the service you're looking for. And that opens a very wide play for hackers and other nefarious people, to do things on the internet. And data is currency. I said that back when I was running PGP in 2005 as a response to an article that was written. And why do people rob banks? That's where the money is. Why do people steal data? Because that's where the money is today. And the lack of really controls and really relying on things like a 50-year-old convenience of a username and password that can be readily mimicked or stolen has really caused a lot of issues out there.
So if we do have a member of a C-suite somewhere listening, what would you say to them about the importance of strong consumer data privacy and the organisation and the role that organisations need to step up and take there? What message would you deliver?
I think there's a couple to the C-suite. One, you're going to be faced, especially in certain markets globally, with the fact that consumers can vote with their feet very quickly. As easy it is to enroll somebody to your server and services that you want them to use to reduce cost or even increase your revenue, when they have a problem of logging in or they have a problem of usability, or worse, you get a data breach, all the data breach studies have shown they vote quickly with their feet when they're not secure. Working with the payments group, with Karen Webster's team, we did a study on what they call the super connected consumer. We find that those people are making $100,000 in US currency a year or more. They're connected to 6 or more different devices. So they're ideally the kind of consumer you want to attract. Two things stand out of the super connected consumer. One, if they have a problem, they want it remediated quickly and easily. Two, they want connectivity and usability of the devices to be paramount. They prefer using something like a biometric login, for example. Almost 60% of those super connected users, that's their preferred way of logging in. And last, if they have a problem, they are the quickest group that was studied out of, I think, 4,000 people that were queried. They were the biggest group that moved quickly with their feet. So to the C-suite, if you're about digital transformation, usability and security are going to be central to the customers you want to keep or attract the most.
For any organisations that are listening today and they're considering that FIDO-based standards approach to meet today's standards, are there any tips on how that business can evaluate the authentication hygiene of their employees, customers, end users, etc.? Is there any advice you would offer there?
Yeah, I would say this, that more and more we're seeing regulations in Europe, PSD2, GDPR. We're seeing those regulations move to the United States, where authentication of users, both consumers, employees, partners, are paramount to the digital experience. There's more regulation coming. There's more capability of needing to do things like step-up authentication in banking or financial services. And what you want to do is, one, the digital journey for these users is not one size fits all. You're going to have some users that want to use their laptops and desktops still. Some users, the phone is going to be their preferred way of doing business with you on their smartphones. In certain emerging markets around the world, you're going to have to deal with less than smartphones and less than tablets and laptops to get these people to communicate and vend with you. So you've got to have a flexible capability, one. Two, you've got to have something that meets the needs of both a regulatory environment, but most of all, you're going to have to work on something that's really easy to use. And so that balance, which is orthogonal to the way security systems have worked for many, many years in tech, that system of making something far more secure and far easier to use is really going to be key in you building your digital transformation strategies. And most of the places that we've placed the protocol, the Nok Nok version of the FIDO protocol, with all of the capability we've built on top of the handshake protocol that FIDO brings to the world, most of them have been central in a digital transformation project. They're not just trying to solve login. Login is really just the beginning of that journey. Once I have you onboarded, logged in, I can use that login essentially federated throughout the different applications that my company or the vendor offers. Ultimately, the goal is ecosystem federation, that I can go inter and intra company by logging in and using shared services throughout my session and not have to keep logging in over and over again. Or, as we all know, when there's a remediation problem, have to start the entire process over again from the beginning by having to give more and more information to get logged in or relogged into the service I was trying to use. So, long answer to a short question, but the net of it is digital transformation and logging in is central. and being able to use a key-based system, which FIDO is keys because the internet's made up of locks and keys, to provide services better, faster, easier for your consumer will be the standard in the future.
And before you came back on the podcast today, I was doing a little bit of research and getting up to speed with developments. And I read that CompoSecure and Nok Nok Labs have partnered to deliver this advanced security and authentication across platforms with also a best-in-class user experience. Is that something you can expand on for people that have not seen this announcement?
Yeah, the CompoSecure team builds metal credit cards, and metal credit cards have a ton of uses out there. One, they can't be cloned. They're not plastic. They last longer. The interesting thing is they have a communication chip on them. And most people know how to use credit and debit cards. They know how to use them in the e-commerce section. They know how to use them in stores. It's a pretty universally known user behavior. What we've been able to do using our system is be able to tie together the credit card as a form of authentication, because I can basically geofence it to your device. So I can say, if you're on an e-commerce platform to the relying service, my credit card is here because it's talking to my phone. And together I give a stronger signal to the back-end service that I am Phil Dunkelberger. This is Phil Dunkelberger's phone. And oh, by the way, Phil Dunkelberger's credit card is within 3 feet of the phone. So I go from this idea of card not present in the payments world out there, and money makes the world go round, to being card present whenever I'm online. And that's a much different way than if you've ever experienced have somebody pirate your credit card number and use it online. My history is long and sordid with hours spent trying to remediate that in remediation systems, usually hours spent talking to a call center. But now I've got the ability for something everybody knows how to use, a debit or credit card, marrying that up with your digital life and giving you the ability to have strong multi-factor authentication without you learning how to do anything else or having to enter anything else. Using technology today, marrying two things. The analogy we've been using is there's an old commercial, if your listeners are familiar with the candy Reese's peanut butter cups.
Yes.
The old commercial was, we had a kid with a candy bar of a chocolate bar and another kid with a jar of peanut butter that crashed their bikes together and came up with a new candy, a peanut butter encased in chocolate. And that's kind of the idea of this, which is nobody really thought about metal credit cards being used as a multi-factor authentication device. But the cool thing about it is they're a credit card. They have use other than just being a digital token.
And there's so much to be cautious about at the moment, but with the right measures in place, what excites you about the road ahead? Is there anything that has really caught your attention?
Well, look at the CompoSecure announcement.
Yeah.
You know, I remember when I got the phone call and I said to myself, I've got 2 of those metal credit cards in my wallet, right? It's exciting when somebody calls and says, hey, can we use the protocol you guys built in your servers to use this thing as something more than a credit card that we can help prevent fraud and make the user experience better? That's pretty exciting. That's a fundamental shift in the way we think about credit cards and online commerce. I look at the other things that you can do with digital passports, work that we've been doing with OSD out of Vienna in Austria with digital passports. I look at the things that they're doing. One of our big customers, Docomo in Japan, that has 800 services where you don't have to use a username and password anymore because they've implemented the protocol. You can do everything from ordering pizza to your banking off your phone in your living room while ordering a new movie on your set-top box, all just using your phone. Or the work we've done with the ATM vendors where you can walk up, use your phone to essentially get money out of an ATM.
Yeah.
Instead of having to, have your card, a pad, having to shield the pad, having to hope there's no keyloggers on the pad. Pull your phone out of your pocket, swipe your finger, and money comes out of the slot.
Yeah. And especially in a world of COVID, where people don't even want to touch those keys on the credit card pad now either.
Well, back to contactless. The world is going contactless, and what you want are your devices being able to be the front end, really extending identity and usability to your endpoints. That is really what I get excited about solving a lot of these usability issues and security issues that, like I said, up until the last probably 3 or 4 years, you were stuck with using a username and password, sometimes another factor of authentication, sometimes having to use all of those at the same time to a call center, and basically disrupting your day when you just want to get in, get out, get on with your life.
Well, now I've got you a little bit excited about the road ahead and the future. Another feature that I've added to the podcast since we last spoke is I asked my guests to share a song that has inspired them, or maybe a piece of music that has accompanied them throughout their tech career, inspires them, or just helps them get their head in the zone before going in a meeting or going on stage. And is there a story behind your song choice? And then we'll add it to the Spotify playlist. Is there a song that means anything to you?
I love the question, and thank you for doing that. And if it was Tuesday, a lot of the broadcasters here in the U.S. do 2 for Tuesday. I'm going to give you a 2 for. One is for all the entrepreneurs out there, and it's the Dan Fogelberg song, "There's a Place in the World for a Gambler." And I can remember hearing that song when I was in college, when it came out. And it's always been meaningful to me because the line, "and he sees." Many, many times entrepreneurs have a vision or a dream, and they need to see and they need to hold on to that, even if it's a big gamble. So that's for the entrepreneurial people listening to your podcast. The second one is a Mary Chapin Carpenter song, which in many points in my life has been an anthem for me, which is called "The Hard Way." And there's a line in there that says, "We got here," and I'm paraphrasing it, "we got here not by luck, but by never turning back."
Love it.
And that to me is a lot about my journey in tech and my journey in 10 years of trying to get the world to shift from using usernames and passwords and things to something better and easier. It's not been an easy road, and it's painted with tries and failures. It's been painted with disappointment. But at the end of the day, when I see a customer able to do things they were never able to do before, it happened because we didn't call it a day. It happened because the team I have and the industry that makes up the FIDO Alliance.org that all work with FIDO, and the protocol, and the people like Apple and Amazon and Microsoft that adopted it. It's the industry coming together and trying to make our use of technology better. And if I've contributed to that in some way, more secure with PGP and better usability with Nok Nok, then I think I've had a pretty good journey. But never turning back is really critical to that.
Wow, well, I'm going to add both of those to the playlist. And even though it's not 2 for 2 Tuesday as we record this, we didn't get you to choose a song last time you was on. So I kind of owe you one anyway. So we'll get them both on there. But for anyone just wanting to find out more about Nok Nok, what's the best way of finding you guys online? And also for people listening that want to contact your team, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, both. We've got the landing pages and all the information at Nok Nok labs.com, nnl.com, a number of ways. You can find us by putting in Nok Nok Labs on any of the search engines, and we'll come up. If you search for FIDO, we're synonymous with FIDO as we created the protocol, and with partners built it out to be the international standard. So a lot of ways to get a hold of us, a lot of ways to get information from us, downloads, and or leave your information and somebody will contact you.
Well, it's been great having you back on, talking about authentication, the importance of strong consumer data privacy, and the need for organisations to evaluate their authentication hygiene of employees, customers, and end users, etc. But more than anything, it was just great having a catch-up. So thank you so much for joining me again. And I've got to make a promise to you now. We will not leave it 2 years till we speak again. But thanks for joining me today, Phil.
It's been an honor and a privilege as always. And you and the listeners, please stay out there. And thank you for them spending the time with me today.
It's always a pleasure having Phil on the show, and just great exploring authentication, the importance of strong consumer data privacy, and the need for organisations to evaluate their authentication hygiene of everyone from employees, customers, end users, and maybe consider a FIDO-based standards approach to meet today's standards. But that's just me and Phil chatting the breeze on a podcast today. What about you? What about your insights, experiences, expertise I know you will have some. So please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, website techblogwriter.co.uk, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram @NeilCHughes. But all that's left for me to say is a big thank you as always. Hopefully you'll join me again tomorrow. But until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.